Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for being here. This is Spirit Matters, your daily spiritual check-in, and I'm so glad that you are here. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. I'm glad you found us. Not sure how you did that, but you're here. It's not by chance, and whatever you're meant to hear today is something that divinity has perfectly cooked up for you. So I hope you find something valuable. If you're a regular listener, thank you for being a regular listener. You're crazy, just like us. We show up every day and we just check in with each other and we read from Bhagavad Gita or spiritual literatures, give ourselves a dose of spiritual truth and reflection, things to chew on during the day, and then we take it with us. And we're so glad that you're here. My name is Dal Guranga, and I'm here with Vasudev, who's been our guest all week long. And today's Friday, which means it's the last day of Vasudev's time this week, but there's already been lots of requests for Vasudev to come back more regularly. So I'm hoping that we can I'm going to send everybody Vasudev's email, phone number, address, social security number, Venmo, and you can just spam him with tons of messages to come back and be with us more often, because there's a lot of love coming in for you, Vasudev. Having said that, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a beautiful morning here in New York City.
New York City weather. It's out and about. It's here. We've bumped the hump and the weather is now decent. Once it's like perpetually above 60, you know that we've entered into a new phase.
Yes. Yeah.
Yesterday was like close to 80.
Yeah. We just started a rooftop garden at the Bhakti Center. It's always the time when I feel like, okay, now the season has changed. All the plants are going up. The marigolds are going in. And it's always such a joy because you can see Krishna also through these cycles of time, cycles of nature, and it's to see something grow from seed and grow flowers, and then you can offer those, very homegrown flowers. That's always a special time. Simple thing, but it feels so profound because it's offering back, what Krishna is giving us.
Krishna says, of seasons I'm flower bearing spring.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's incredible how we look at miracles and we think, what is a miracle? And a miracle is just something that we haven't seen before, but actually, like, miracles are taking place every day, and just because it's commonplace, like the idea of a flower growing from the earth. You take a seed, you bury it in the earth, and you just add water and sunshine, and then it sprouts up, and everything in that vine somehow guides it to blossoming in the form of a marigold or a rose or a tulip or a gardenia or a jasmine. And it's like, if you've never seen that before, you'd be like, this is a freaking miracle. What kind of sorcery is this? Like, this is crazy. But just because we see it every day, we're like, oh yeah, it's just a flower. It's just growing,
Yeah. The color, if you look at the colors also, it's just the brightness of those colors is amazing.
Yeah.
And in the flower, in a marigold, there's enough seeds practically in one flower, practically enough seeds to plant a whole garden.
Really?
Not quite, but it's a lot of seeds in there.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Well, if you've never been, we have a rooftop garden that we create in the summer, and we're starting springtime dinners. If you're local in New York City, which I don't think any of you are, Irenka's local, I think. We have rooftop dinners that we're starting. Did you know that, Vasudev?
Yeah, starting next week.
And so just using the rooftop, getting up there. So anyways, we're here. We've been reading Bhagavad Gita, discussing different verses, been beautiful discussions. Where we left off yesterday, just to get right into it, we were reading verses 39, only 39, and then we were going to read verse 40, talking a lot about faith, and about faith in the simple things, that I remember Gauravani was here last night for kirtan, and it was really sweet. He led a kirtan most of the entire evening, and he would speak and share a little bit, and he was talking about how all we have to do in kirtan is just listen, like just really deeply take in the sound of the mantra, the sound of Krishna's names, and just let it come into our ears and come into our heart with an open heart, free of distraction, and just listen and pay attention and bring up our presence very deeply. And he's told a story of once a devotee was describing to Srila Prabhupada about their experience of chanting, and said, when I chant, see like a blue light and all sorts of colors, and I feel like I'm observing different planets in the universe, and all of these visions are coming to me, and it's just like these all these incredible visions of colors and light. And Srila Prabhupada says, just keep chanting and that will all go away. And so it's like, actually, we don't have to envision something else or create something else or make it more complicated than it needs to be, but the simple things are really, really important. So we've been discussing that. And then we made our way towards humility and character, because we're talking about knowledge, right? We were talking about
Yeah,
knowledge.
knowledge and character, how character leads to knowledge, especially humility, pridelessness, and then also how knowledge leads to character, because when we establish in spiritual truth and our spiritual identity, then we can practice a lot of those qualities, especially in provoking situations, in more difficult situations, because then we awaken, those natural characteristics of the soul.
Yeah, and life, it becomes like this big giant correctional facility of the soul where we're learning. Actually, it's like a spiritual gymnasium that's constantly providing us opportunities to practice humility, practice tolerance, learn forbearance, um, flex our compassion muscles, etc. And if I can learn to see those situations, and we see Queen Kunti making those prayers in the Bhagavatam, Bhishma Dev describing about the reversals of the Pandavas and all the challenges as ultimately directives and gifts from the Supreme Person, from Krishna, from that Supreme Absolute Truth, because actually it's allowing me to soften my heart and come closer to Krishna and lean more into surrender rather than ultra self-reliance. And the question that we ended on was, how do we practice high levels of character maturely, where I can be humble, I can be tolerant, I can be forgiving, but I'm not denying myself and building more resentment because I'm allowing people to treat me in a way that doesn't feel right. And I think it takes maturity and self-reflection to be able to do these things in a way that is thoughtful. So I wanted to get your reflections and thoughts on that, Vasudev. So how we can do this thoughtfully and go about practicing character and humility and tolerance in a way that is mature.
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's just very important to define what is humility. And Bhakti Tirtha Swami famously said, humility does not mean to think of oneself less, but to think less of oneself.
It goes the other way around.
Yes, the other way
Not
around.
to think
Sorry.
less of yourself, like to hold yourself in less esteem, but just to think of yourself less, meaning to be more thoughtful of
Yeah,
others.
that's what I said. To
Yeah.
be less self-absorbed.
Yeah.
And humility really takes place in relationship to divine. It's feeling oneself small in relationship to Krishna, who is the supreme great. So and that humility naturally comes in when we feel, that divine presence, which is so immense. We cannot feel but feel humble, insignificant, like very small, but it's a happy small. And that's a very important one. Is feels small, insignificant, but one feels happy about that. It's not that one feels that one has no value. That's very different. One has limited value in relationship to Krishna, because Krishna values each and every living being so much, and when you feel that reciprocal relationship, and one feels that Krishna values my service and Krishna values my presence, then one feels still very small, insignificant, but in a very, very happy way, in a grateful way, because it was still seen in that way by the divine. So and it's often when one doesn't value oneself. It's when one overvalue oneself in the sense of pride and ego that there's problems. And it's also the other way when one, doesn't have a good sense of self, valuing oneself, that one is open to like, yeah, I don't deserve to be treated well, so that's why, I'm just gonna tolerate this situation, which is like some abusive situation or so forth, or something like that. So one has to value oneself in relationship to Krishna, to the divine, in a healthy way, and feeling small and insignificant, but one still has value, a limited value, because of we all can give pleasure and service to Krishna.
What are ways you think that people can learn to value themselves in a way that doesn't cross the line into pride and egotism, but is a healthy sense of valuing? Because I love that. I love the idea of actually valuing oneself in a healthy way. And what does that look like, or what do you think that people can do to what does it look like people to develop that sense of self-value?
Well, it comes down again to a basic understanding of what the self is. That as a self, we are eternal. We are a conscious spark of the divine. We are full of happiness. So even like, I can't say I'm constantly in touch with that, but like getting glimpses of that every single day, connecting with that every single day, especially through spiritual practice, and awakening that is that sense of like value. And also nobody can take that value away from me. Like even in particular situations which may be challenging, like I can hold that value, because that's independent of anything external. Like nothing external can affect that, can affect my eternal nature. And so my service is as I do lots of service on the altar, and also at home. It's of puja, worship, and the essence of worship, like this practice of worship, offering different articles like flowers and incense and so many other things. It's elaborate, can be an elaborate process, but the essence of all of it is one's identification. Is when one comes on the altar, when one comes to serve Krishna, one leaves aside one's material identities. One no longer is such and such of the, I'm a middle-aged man from the Netherlands, and I'm a man, and etc., etc., etc. One leaves aside all of it, comes to Krishna as a pure soul, and offers worship, service as a pure soul. And again, that once or before starting the worship, one has to connect with that eternal identity. And that is always gives that always gives so much life to me, because it always connects me again with who I truly am. And I feel value in the sense of I'm a servant of Krishna.
What's the verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu from the Narada Sutras, Sarvapati Vinir Muktam?
That's the essence of it. Sarvapati Vinir Muktam, to give up all one's upadhis, all one's designations.
When you come to speak, it gives a definition of bhakti as favorable, active service towards Krishna. And then when you do that, in order to do that, you have to ultimately, the result is, and the requirement is, to give up designations that I'm something other than just an eternal servant of the Supreme. And I think what I appreciated from what you're sharing is both value and identity. How do I identify myself? And that when I'm offended by somebody, really what's being offended is some identity that I've given myself, that I'm attached to, that I've attached myself to, that isn't real. And I've trying to extract value from somewhere that is false, or that is unstable, or that isn't sufficient enough. And I think a lot of the pain, when I think about my life, when I think about painful, whether it's painful interpersonal actions, or senses of failure, inner or outer failures, or sense of stress or anxiety, I can generally, if I try, relate it back, if I'm honest and sincere, relate it back to that there's some sense of, I'm trying to get my sense of value from somewhere outside of myself. Like, I don't feel a sense of inherent value as a spirit soul in relationship with Krishna, that I'm feeling that relationship, and feeling a sense of I don't need to gain value or win value or obtain value. Like, I'm inherently valuable as a spirit soul. And then my endeavors to try to get that value become thwarted or frustrated, and then therefore I experience stress, anxiety, resentment, competition, etc. And what I'm hearing from you is that real humility and real sense of real humility is intrinsically tied to our sense of identity, and our
Yeah,
sense of identity is intrinsically connected to our relationship with Krishna. And that when we have that, we inherently understand that we have value as spirit souls, not because of my social status, my bank status, my career status, my winning sports team fan base, my followers on social media, my cool haircut, like whatever it might be. That's not my value, my identity. And I think that it's what we can see when we look into challenges in the material world. We can see, wow, it's painful, it's challenging, but it's helping me shed layers of identity that aren't real. And it's helping expose the way in which I'm trying to extract value from places that really don't have value. And then we're left to actually, in some ways, Krishna just guides things in a way that we're left where we have no other shelter, no other place to turn, but to the actual place of real shelter.
yeah, yeah. That's a beautiful mantra we chant before doing worship. It's actually recited by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Mm.
It's during the couple of weeks from now, we have the Rath Yatra festival, large chariot festival here on Fifth Avenue, which originally comes from Jagannath Puri, taking forms of Krishna in these like giant chariots, and pulled in the streets with kirtan. It's a beautiful celebration. But during that festival, in the middle of it, in the height of it, it's described how Sri Chaitanya starts to offer prayers. And he offers one prayer. It says, Naham vipro dachinarupatir napi vaishana shudro naham varni nachikrihapatir navanastoya tirva. It starts with, I am not this, I'm not that, I'm not, because he's, of course, living in the Vedic world, where I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a warrior, I'm not a tradesperson or a worker, I'm not a student, I'm not a householder, I'm not a renunciant. So he said, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. And these are kind of external positions. And we can extrapolate from that, like so many other things, so many other identities we carry. And then the next line says, I'm just Gopi Bhakta Pada Kamali, or Dasa Das, and on the Dasa, I'm the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. So right at the heart of this, in this festival, is such a powerful scene. It's kind of it's a real highlight of the whole book, where he's dancing in front of Krishna and expressing his very deep spiritual emotions. And right at the cusp of that, he speaks this verse. And Radhanath Swami so often recites this last line, Gopi Bhakta Padakamali, or Dasa Das. I'm just the servant of the servant of the servant. That's true humility, to identify oneself as such, to be the servant, not directly even the servant of Krishna, but the servant of the servant of the servant.
That's a beautiful meditation. I think it also brings a beautiful context into the idea of sadhana. We've been talking about sadhana a little bit this week, and um, whether it be in our meditation or our chanting or in our service, that actually the meditation is, I want to change the way in which I identify myself. That I don't want to identify myself as that really spiritual life is a process of re-identifying ourselves as a spirit soul rather than everything else we identify ourselves in the material world, because that's ultimately that's where I get my true value, my identity. So I don't want to be, as long as I see myself as, you know, a man in this world or a woman in this world or a business person or, you know, whatever else the identity may be, it's subject to all of the frustrations and disappointments and challenges that I'm going to experience with that. But when I start to actually identify myself as something much greater, it was like Richard Rohr, who says that, maybe I referenced it this week or not, but I've referenced it a couple of times, where he says that it's not possible for the soul to be offended. That there's something in me being offended, I know it's coming from the ego, because the soul is it's just too big, it's too broad, it's too deep, it's too vast. And so when I'm situated in that identity, there's all the natural qualities that Krishna talks about consistently, about finding peace, finding equanimity, finding joy, finding happiness, because I'm actually situated in my true self. And so I think that that's the meditation when I'm chanting, when I'm reading, when I'm serving, is that I don't want to identify myself with anything other than I am that eternal spirit soul connected with Krishna, and that's who I am. And when I have that, so it brings humility and it brings confidence, and it brings faith, and it brings peace, and it brings joy, and it brings contentment, and it releases fear, it releases anxiety. But it's a gradual transition over time. But that's the context, that's the prayer, that's the meditation when we're performing our sadhana and we're performing our spiritual practices.
Yeah, and that also then becomes a guiding principle of certain situations are just not healthy for us. They don't reinforce that identity. It's not favorable for the cultivation of that identity.
Yeah.
And that may be sometimes a kind of an abusive situation. That may be sometimes a situation where, you know, where people distract us in a way from the path, and reinforce certain material identities. Yeah. So that becomes the guiding principle to decide, like make decisions, and to see what's favorable, what's not favorable, what is nourishing my true identity, and what is taking me away from it. So and then real humility is to act in line with that principle.
Yeah. There's two verses from the Gita I wanted to read that I was thinking of. I looked up, and then I want to read and share these verses, and then we'll turn it over to Kimberly to wrap it up for us and give us some takeaways, because we're just at our time. That's from the 8th chapter of the Gita. I read this recently in my community group. It's from the 8th chapter, verses 7 and 8. Krishna tells Arjuna, therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. He's the warrior. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. One who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, their mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, O Partha, is sure to reach me. When I read that, I appreciated how Krishna is saying, continue your life, go about your life, because you're saying, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Shudra, I'm not all of those things. And at the same time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lived the life of a sannyasi. You know, he lived the life, he had social roles in which he played. So he didn't give up the roles, but he gave up the conception that this is me, that the attachment to that identity. And so Krishna's saying, you go ahead and carry out your roles in life, but do it while constantly meditating on me and having the meditation that I'm offering what I'm doing as a service in a mood of wanting to reinforce a new sense of identity,
Yeah.
reinforce a new sense that because all of it is going to go away at some point anyways, when the body ends, when life ends. So I'm going to be forced to let go of all these identities anyways. So why not practice now? And we don't have to fear giving them all up, because actually we're not just giving it up and having nothing, but we're embracing a new identity that Krishna reveals to us, that Krishna reciprocates with us as we go, and we are able to experience Krishna more viscerally, more vividly in our life if we perform our practices in the right mood. And there's so much emphasis on performing our sadhana, performing our service in the right mood, and having the meditation and the idea that we're not watering the weeds in our heart, but we're watering the seed of love in our heart. So I just love that meditation, and I just wanted to bring in a couple verses in this chapter because I thought it was relevant to what we were saying. And
Yeah,
with
this is one
that,
short comment,
yeah, go ahead.
on that is in bhakti, we don't necessarily give up our material identities, because we also have presently we have our eternal identity, and then we have other identities in this world. Some of you may be parents or have certain roles in society, but it's not necessarily that in giving up, we have to give identification with those, identify with our true self, but we don't have to necessarily give up those identities, but we can harmonize the identities we have in this world with our eternal identity, and use those identities in our service. So let's say I'm a parent, that's an identity, and that's the way how I can express my eternal identity. Or let's say you're a manager, you're a leader in the spiritual community. That's not your eternal position, but it's the way how you can express your eternal nature. And it's like that. Gita so beautifully harmonizes these two things, that we don't have to give up our identities in this world. That's actually Gita says don't do that, because then you're feeling lost, because you're not fully. It takes a little while to become fully established in your spiritual identity.
Yeah.
But through those identities, through those roles we have, and harmonizing them with our eternal identity, we can realize our eternal identity.
Yeah.
So that is the essence of Gita. That's
Beautiful.
why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, remain in your position, stane stita, like just remain in your position, your natural position. And from there on, you practice bhakti.
It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful reflection, and beautiful spot to wrap it up and to end. And thank you for bringing that in and sharing that with us. Thank you. We're going to turn it over to Kimberly, who's going to wrap it up for us with a few takeaways, and then we'll have our closing words. We're going to send you all on your way. Thank you so much. What do you got for us, Kimberly?
Okay, we're taken away to feel small in a happy and grateful way. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less. We are inherently valuable as a spirit soul connected to the divine. Nothing external can affect our eternal nature. And be the servant of the servant of the servant. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. What are you walking away, Vasudeva, from today, this week? What's your closing word? What are you walking away with and taking home with you? I mean, you're already home, but.
Yeah. Well, this thought of humility as really identifying with my eternal self, and moving through the world in that spirit, and then whatever comes our way to accept that as Krishna's grace, and also feeling satisfied with that identity, and joyful in that identity, and grateful. And then whatever comes my way, it's just a gift from Krishna today and hereafter.
Yeah. Thank you so much. A lot of love coming in for you from the chat, from devotees and people that are here, appreciating all of your wisdom, Vasudeva. I'm walking away amongst all of the little gems that came in. I'm also just walking away how important it is, the verse Matkata what is it from the ninth?
Yeah.
10:9? Makchata Makata Prana, Bodha Yantas Parasparam. The idea of just people coming together and sharing and discussing realizations, and so much comes from that. And Krishna, I feel, just 2 verses later, Krishna says that I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy the darkness of ignorance with the shining lamp of knowledge. That when we come together as friends and community, and we simply just open our hearts and share in spiritual life, we not only learn from each other, like we just practically learn things that we didn't realize before or look at in the same way, but we also invite Krishna into our heart to illuminate us with, as you mentioned earlier in the week, Krishna Surya Sama Maya Hoya Andhakar, that Krishna's like the sunshine. And so I'm just appreciating the opportunity just to connect with you and to hear from you and just kind of churn things and see what comes up, and feeling like Krishna is reciprocating in the heart with that, and it's reminding me the importance of that. And so even outside the podcast, I do that more regularly with friends and with people. So thank you for that opportunity, Vasudev. Grateful.
Thank you, Dial. Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you to everyone here. Yeah, hope to meet you all in person one day as well.
Yeah,
Please
we're gonna
do
have to
come to the Bhakti Center whenever you have a chance. Dial me. We're kind of part of the furniture, so always there's a
we're
hope.
around. Yeah, we'll have to have some like reunion, or some, not a reunion, but just a union, because we've never union before, so it wouldn't be a reunion. We have to meet in some like central location for everybody, like in Nebraska or something. Someplace that's like somewhat central for everybody. So Bhakti Center, Nebraska 2024.
Okay, let's do
Coming
it.
your way. Okay, everybody, we love you. We're grateful for you. We're taking the weekend off. We'll be back next week. Please take care, be well, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah.